Joining us now, the man himself, Matt Taibbi of TK News, which you all should be subscribed to on Substack. Great to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Good to see you both.
So let's go ahead and put this piece you wrote up on the screen, which I rather enjoyed, but I'm sure, as usual, got you in some hot water. This should not be a controversial take, but your headline here is, "Regime change doesn't work, you morons." How many examples of regime change blowing up in our faces do we really need before realizing it's a disastrous policy? Will we really try it with a nuclear-armed adversary? Matt, just give us a few examples for those who need like a little historical reminder of all of our attempts at regime change and how that exactly has gone.
Well, obviously the two most recent ones were Iraq and Afghanistan, with Iraq being the signature program because actually in both of those cases we spent massive amounts of money. I mean, trillions of dollars. And a lot of lives, and basically ended up worse off than we were before the operation started. But even before that, we have a lengthy history of trying to overturn foreign governments, install leaders. The most recent incarnation of this idea is that we're trying to install liberal democracies everywhere, but that wasn't always the case. Sometimes we were trying to install authoritarians who were more friendly to the United States, like in the case of the Shah. But the new fad is let's make countries everywhere liberal democracies, and that way we won't have any war or conflict. And it just hasn't worked because we can't. It's a naive belief that we can force other countries to adopt a system that they may not have any history with.
Matt, what do you think that this impetus comes from? We were talking about this earlier in the show. I mean, how can you, I don't understand how you can live through Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan in the last 20 years and be like, you know what, this time, the fifth time, that's the charm. I'm being facetious, but it's a real thing. A lot of the people in our elite media actually believe this. Where does this come from?
I have no idea, and I would add a lot of the countries in the former Soviet Union, because that's apropos to this discussion. I mean, part of the reason that I feel so hardened about this issue is that, I lived in Russia and in Uzbekistan and some other parts of the former Soviet Union during a time when we thought that it would be as simple as, well, let's give these countries stock markets, elections, and some other institutions, and they will instantly become American-friendly allies. And then before you know it, we're fixing elections so that they don't elect communists or other politicians that we don't like. I think there's a naivete about this, and I think there's also a lack of foresight about the number of things that can go wrong when you try to install a leader in a foreign country. People think that somehow that foreign populations won't react negatively to that, and they always do.
Yeah, well, and even before we get to the conversation of whether or not it works, it's also illegal. So, like, on its face,
right.
Even if you could be persuaded that, like, no, this time it really would work, we still shouldn't do it. You have this line in here that I think is really interesting. You talk about, I think this is Thomas Friedman is that right? Who had the McDonald's Theory, which is...
The Golden Arches Theory, yeah.
Yes, when a country reaches a certain level of economic development, when it has a middle class big enough to support a McDonald's, it becomes a McDonald's country, and people in McDonald's countries don't like to fight wars. They like to wait in line for burgers. Now, I have seen a lot of sort of triumphalism from neoliberals who are basically like, see, our worldview is validated by what's happening in the world right now. And I just see it as complete opposite. I mean, in a lot of ways, we were instrumental in architecting the Russian regime that exists today. And so for me, the events that are unfolding are a thorough indictment of that view of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say that as somebody who, as a young reporter, was sent out to cover the ribbon cuttings of all those American institutions. Yeah, like, well, not McDonald's, but KFC, like, IKEA, obviously is a Swedish thing. But there was a belief that once we gave them the consumer economy and some of the superficial trappings of Western culture, that immediately they would come over on board and they would be like us. And this, I think, stems from a fundamental misunderstanding of how, like, the idea that cultures can be different, that they can have different histories and different reactions to things. So yeah, both Ukraine and Russia had McDonald's, and now they're, at each other's throats, and the McDonald's obviously didn't help a whole lot. It's just further evidence that this is collapsing. But more to the point, what's going on is, what I fear is that the United States is not letting Ukraine, or not empowering Ukraine to make its own decisions about how to negotiate its way out of this war, and that is going to lead to a quagmire of the type that we're familiar with.
I completely agree. I'll make a controversial statement. I think McDonald's tastes the best in authoritarian countries. I hate to say it.
It actually does.
I had a taro pie in China, and man, that thing was good.
All right, well, I can't speak to authoritarian countries, but I did spend 6 weeks while I was pregnant in India, and I ate an inordinate number of McChickens in India, and it was like a lifeline.
Maharaja burger is a real thing.
On a serious note, Matt, what do you think is the Biden administration's policy? And I don't think you'll mind if I share that. We were kind of talking a little bit offline about this, and we're saying, like, we've gotten some leaks of administration officials who were like, the real end game here is Putin out of power. Now, they think they can accomplish that without going in militarily, just by like squeezing them through sanctions and praying and hoping to foment some sort of protest movement that effectuates a coup against the government. But, shortly after we were having that conversation about, or maybe it's just incompetence and they don't really have a plan or a goal here, Biden comes out and says Putin cannot remain in power, and in my opinion seems to sort of give up the game about what they're really thinking. So how do you read the tea leaves of what the administration is actually doing, what they're actually thinking, and what their real goals are here?
Well, it sure seems like, dating back years, that they've had a plan about having a military presence there. They announced their intention to try to expand NATO to Ukraine. But more recently, I think what you've seen is a number of quotes by officials who are saying exactly what you said. Like, the end game is, we want to drag Russia into a quagmire. That was in a David Sanger piece in the New York Times. There was a Bloomberg piece that quoted some British officials saying that our number one option is to bleed Putin. We want the conflict extended, and there's a logic to that, unless you're Ukrainian, right? Because basically what the West is saying is, we think that this is going to be politically costly for Putin, and that ultimately this will result in political instability back in Russia, and he'll leave power. There are two errors to that thinking. Number one, it doesn't take into account the cost to Ukraine. The other one is, who's to say that the person who replaces Putin won't be worse than Putin? Because there is that wing of the Russian government that's waiting to come in and correct the embarrassment that they feel that they're going through. So I actually do think that that's what they're thinking, is that we want this to go on for a while. There's some evidence for that, and they think that it'll result in a new leader in Russia that will be more amenable to them.
I think whenever we look at all of this, Matt, what we just see is that when you have a lack of coherence in strategy, what fills the void are the most powerful, like, immovable forces, which remains interventionism. And in that context, what are some of the danger points that we should look to? People forget, it may seem like it's been a long time. We're a very, very short time in the history of most conflicts. They last for years. I mean, what are some of the potential danger points that we could be coming up on in the near future?
Well, I think we're already at one of them, which is where Zelensky asks for United States help in achieving a diplomatic solution and doesn't really get an answer. Because if the United States sort of essentially opts out of the diplomatic process, then Zelensky is no longer empowered to negotiate his way out of this conflict. And really, Russia's really at war with us and not with Ukraine. And that massively complicates the situation. In other words, if Zelensky doesn't have the authority to sit at the table and say, all right, I accept those terms, the sanctions will be over tomorrow, then we're at cross purposes. Then the situation gets much more complicated. So I think that's one big thing, is that if we don't participate in the peace process, then that's a major indication that something much bigger already than what's going on is afoot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's all really valuable insight and perspective. Guys, go and subscribe to Matt's Substack. His insights here are really invaluable. Thank you so much, Matt. Great to see you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much, Krystal, Saagar. Take care.
Our pleasure.
It's great to see you, man. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Look, it's been a fun week. I told you all the Taylor Lorenz segment got demonetized. Still zero explanation from YouTube as to what exactly happened there. And that's exactly the issue. Being reliant on these ridiculous content policies, be it the election or this harassment, whatever that means, exactly, just means that the only people we can rely on are you. As we actually talking more about our budget today. I mean, yeah, compared to CNN, it's not that big, but we have all these new...
For us, it's a lot.
For us, it's a lot. And in terms of our partnerships and the general cost of running all this and editing time and continuing to hire and explore better ways to give you guys the midterms, it's a lot of fun. And we have a very, very big announcement that's going to be coming on our Monday show about what's happening next week. I'm really excited to debut it. It involves a little bit of travel on our end, so that's a little bit of tease. But there's going to be a big thing happening next week that you're all going to want to tune into. And our premium subscribers are going to get a very, very special benefit that some of them have been asking for a long time. So it's going to be fun. We can't wait to debut it, and we'll see you all next week.
That's right. We're expanding, we're adding, we're traveling, we're doing all the things, guys. And we couldn't be happier to have your support in all of it. So thank you. Enjoy your weekend. We're going to have some great content for you then, and we'll see you back here for a full show on Monday. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.